In the cold, deep blackness before dawn, the silence over northern Japan is not peace. It is a state of coiled, vigilant tension. Here, at Misawa Air Base, the air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for a signal that could come at any moment. At 4:37 a.m., it arrives, not as a distant rumble, but as a piercing electronic scream, a radar warning that shatters the calm and ignites a cascade of perfectly rehearsed responses. A ghost has appeared on the screen, an unidentified AIR craft slicing into Japan's air defense identification zone. It carries no name, no transponder code, and offers no reply. It is a void in the sky, defined only by its speed, its altitude, and the profound questions its presence demands. For the men and women of the United States Air Force, the time for questions is over. The time for answers has just begun. The initial radar contact was a sterile, digital fact, but its implications were immediate and visceral. The intruder had breached the ADIZ, a buffer of international airspace where any aircraft is legally required to identify itself, state its intentions, and follow a pre-approved flight plan. This aircraft did none of those things. It flew without broadcasting an identification, friend or foe or IFF signal, the fundamental electronic handshake that separates friend from potential foe. Japanese air traffic controllers began hailing the aircraft on all standard frequencies, their calls echoing into a void of deliberate silence. The target was large, cruising at high altitude and maintaining a steady, unwavering course. To the trained eye of an air defense operator, these were not the hallmarks of a lost civilian airliner. This was the signature of a military probe, a calculated test of the shield. The alert cascaded from the RADAR room to the quick reaction alert hangars. Here, pilots and machines exist in a state of perpetual readiness. Within seconds of the alarm, 2 U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcons were being brought to life. These were not pilots, summoned from a distant barracks. They were the QRA crews, living and sleeping in full flight gear, just steps from their cockpits, their minds already in the mission. The ground crews moved with a synchronized, furious precision, honed by endless drills. Fuel lines were disconnected, safety pins pulled, and canopies lowered in a fluid, single motion. In less than 90 seconds from the initial siren, both fighters, fully armed and bristling with intent, were thundering down the tarmac, their afterburners tearing a path of raw fire through the pre-dawn gloom. This was no exercise. This was a real-world scramble, a live intercept, where every second lost on the ground meant ceding a critical advantage in the air. As the F-16s clawed into the sky, they were more than just interceptors. They were a clear, unambiguous message sent at Mach 2. Every incursion into this airspace, every challenge to this alliance will be met with immediate and overwhelming resolve. These missions, while executed with wartime intensity, are a grimly routine feature of the modern geopolitical landscape. Japan's Ministry of Defense recorded over 1,000 such scrambles in 2023 alone, a staggering number driven largely by a surge in Chinese military flights. But this encounter felt different. The timing, just before sunrise, offered a cloak of darkness. The target's complete electronic silence was defiant, and its trajectory, a direct line toward the sensitive maritime corridor near Okinawa, was deeply provocative. Okinawa is not just an island. It is a linchpin of American naval power in the Pacific, a strategic fortress bristling with U.S. assets. The decision to launch American F-16s rather than relying solely on the Japan Air Self-Defense Force's capable F-15s was itself a strategic signal. It demonstrated the seamless, integrated nature of the U.S.-Japan Defense Pact, a unified front against any and all challengers. This was not merely about identifying a single AIR craft. It was about defending the territorial and political integrity of a critical region in the Indo-Pacific. Every action, every decision was now part of a larger, silent conflict where control of the skies is paramount. For military analysts, the pattern was chillingly familiar. Chinese aircraft were increasingly flying these probing missions, pushing the boundaries of international norms, testing radar capabilities, communication protocols, and the reaction times of joint defense forces. They flew to the very edge of the rules, without ever technically breaking them. For the pilots ascending into the dark, the identity of their target was still a mystery. But their training, their speed, and their sheer presence in the sky affirmed a simple, unyielding truth. In this part of the world, America does not ignore threats, no matter how silent they may seem. As the two F-16s closed the distance, their own powerful radars sliced through the darkness, painting a clearer picture of the ghost they were hunting. Miles ahead, a shape began to resolve from a mere blip on a screen into a tangible form. It was large, high-winged, and crowned with the unmistakable circular rotodome of a modern airborne early warning and control AIR craft. The intruder was a Chinese military surveillance plane, most likely a Shaanxi KJ-500 or a Y-9Q variant. These are not simple reconnaissance platforms. They are flying intelligence hubs, designed for sophisticated electronic warfare, signals intelligence, and battle management. They are the eyes and ears of a fleet, capable of mapping an entire battle space from tens of thousands of feet in the air. The AIR craft flew with a placid, almost arrogant steadiness at 28,000 feet. There were no escort fighters visible, no sign that it was concerned by the two lethal predators now bracketing its flight path. It continued to ignore all hails from Japanese and American controllers, its radio silent, its IFF transponder dormant. The two F-16s slid gracefully into a standard NATO intercept formation. The lead pilot positioned his jet off the intruder's left wing, slightly below and ahead, a position that offers the Chinese crew an unmistakable view of his AR craft's profile and weaponry. The wingman took up a covering position off the right flank, his eyes and systems scanning the surrounding airspace for any other potential threats. This textbook maneuver is designed to achieve maximum visual identification while maintaining a safe, de-escalated posture. From a distance of approximately 2,000 feet, the American pilots could now see every detail. The high-set wing structure, the powerful turboprop engines, the distinctive radar dome, and the array of antennas and sensors that bristled from the fuselage. Every element of its design pointed to a singular purpose: surveillance. Following protocol, the lead F-16 pilot began a silent, tense dialogue. Through the canopy, he used internationally recognized hand signals, a starkly low-tech form of communication in a high-tech environment. He motioned for the Chinese aircraft to change course, to turn away, to leave the sensitive zone. This procedure is a cornerstone of peacetime intercepts, a final nonverbal warning designed to prevent a miscalculation that could lead to catastrophe. The Chinese crew offered no acknowledgement. No wave, no change in heading, no reply of any kind. The massive AIR craft simply plowed onward, its course taking it directly toward a highly sensitive area just miles from Okinawa, the heart of American naval operations in the region. This was no accident. Analysts would later confirm that an AIR craft like the KJ-500 possesses advanced systems capable of vacuuming up vast amounts of electronic data, from radar emissions to communications frequencies, from dozens, if not hundreds, of miles away. By loitering in this specific corridor, even for a short time, the AIR craft could potentially map the electronic signatures of Allied air and sea defenses, catalog response procedures, and build an invaluable intelligence picture. This was a direct and deliberate challenge. While the plane had not technically violated Japan's sovereign airspace, its path was a calculated intrusion into a zone of critical military importance. The persistent silence from the Chinese crew was equally unnerving. It suggested a rigid adherence to orders, a directive not to engage or communicate under any circumstances. Or perhaps it indicated something deeper, an intent to provoke a response, to see how the US pilots would react to being stonewalled in their own backyard. Inside the cockpits of the F-16s, the atmosphere was one of intense, controlled focus. The pilots kept their weapon systems on safe, their fingers far from any triggers. Their posture remained non-aggressive, their movements precise and predictable. Their mission was clear: shadow, warn, and report. Do not escalate. Do not fire unless fired upon. Yet with every passing second, it became clearer that the Chinese aircraft had no intention of complying. This was not a simple flyby. It was a gauntlet being thrown down. The Chinese were testing the entire system. How fast would the jets scramble? How close would they get? How would they communicate? Would they issue formal warnings? And in doing so, they were sending a message of their own, directly to the United States. We are here, we are watching, and we are willing to operate on the very doorstep of your most vital bases, undeterred by your presence. A platform like the KJ-500 doesn't just take pictures. It inhales a battlespace's electronic soul, RADAR data, command frequencies, communication signals. Flying this close to Okinawa gave it a front-row seat to one of the most active and technologically advanced U.S. military hubs on the planet. From Beijing's perspective, the intelligence payoff was well worth the risk. But just as the encounter seemed to settle into a tense but stable standoff, the Chinese aircraft made a sudden, unexpected move, one that would instantly rewrite the rules of the engagement. Without warning, the massive KJ-500 abruptly pitched its nose down and began to descend. In a swift but controlled maneuver, it shed over 4,000 feet of altitude, dropping from 28,000 to 24,000 feet. In the sterile world of aviation, an unannounced altitude change of this magnitude is a significant event. In a military intercept, it is a tactical action. It is not a standard flight adjustment. It is a move designed to test, to provoke, or to gain an advantage. The American pilots reacted instantly, their own fighters dipping in perfect synchronicity to maintain visual contact and a safe separation distance. The calm, observant nature of the mission had just been fractured. The situation had escalated. Seconds later, the F-16 cockpits lit up with new warnings. A high-pitched, insistent tone filled their helmets, the sound of their radar warning receivers screaming to life. Their onboard electronic countermeasure panels confirmed it. They were being painted and potentially jammed. The signals intelligence gear on the F-16s detected active interference, a clear indication that the KJ-500 was no longer just a passive observer. It had likely activated its sophisticated electronic warfare suite, a move that transformed the mission from simple surveillance to a simulated electronic attack. This was not a standard feature of a routine intelligence-gathering flight. It was an aggressive and deeply provocative act. As if to compound the complexity, another threat materialized. A second, unknown radar contact blinked onto the American pilots' screens. It was small, fast-moving, and located approximately 50 nautical miles to the east. It remained too distant for visual identification, but its flight profile and speed were consistent with an uncrewed aerial vehicle, a drone. It could be a decoy, designed to split the F-16's attention, or a support asset, launched to extend the electronic reach of the mothership by jamming or recording signals from a different angle. China has been increasingly known to deploy these drone escorts on long-range missions, adding another layer of ambiguity and threat to their aerial operations. The F-16 pilots were now faced with a severe tactical dilemma. The rules of engagement were explicit. They could not separate to investigate the second target unless there was confirmed hostile intent from either contact. Splitting the formation would expose them both and violate protocol. They had to stay together, maintaining their tight escort on the primary target while relaying every new detail back to the command center at Misawa. On the ground, the radar team watched the unfolding drama, their screens now tracking two distinct targets. They meticulously recorded every data point: signal strengths, flight vectors, jamming frequencies. Every second of this encounter was now a live-fire intelligence operation. This was no longer just a flight. It was a sophisticated, multi-layered stress test. By dropping altitude and activating its EW systems, the KJ-500 was likely testing how U.S. forces respond under the pressure of electronic interference. The sudden appearance of the second contact was a classic military feint, designed to sow confusion, test discipline, and force the American pilots into making a difficult choice. These are tactics rehearsed in war games, but to see them deployed during a live intercept over international waters was a significant escalation. In isolation, any one of these actions, the altitude shift, the ECM activity, the secondary contact, might be dismissed. But together, they painted a clear picture of a complex, layered operation designed to gather maximum intelligence while pushing the encounter to the brink. In the cockpits, the pilots remained a study in professional calm, their training taking over. They ran systems checks, held their formation, and communicated in clipped, precise language with their controllers, awaiting orders from higher command. Their warning receivers continued to flash, a constant reminder that they were being actively targeted by an electronic adversary. The jamming was persistent, but not overwhelming, just enough to be a serious provocation, but not enough to justify a lethal response. As the tension in the sky stretched to its breaking point, the next move would determine whether this incident would end as another silent standoff, or spiral into something far more dangerous. After nearly 30 minutes of this high-stakes aerial chess match, the Chinese aircraft finally made its move. The KJ-500, having flown deep into Japan's air defense identification zone and probed the defenses around Okinawa, began a slow, deliberate, wide turn to the southeast. Its new heading would take it away from the sensitive military exclusion zones and out over the international airspace of the Philippine Sea. The maneuver was unhurried, methodical. It was not the frantic retreat of an aircraft that had been caught and chased off. It was the measured disengagement of a platform that had successfully completed its mission. Simultaneously, the second radar contact, the fast-moving blip, suspected to be a drone or electronic decoy, vanished. One moment it was there, on the screens at Misawa, a persistent and nagging question mark. The next, it was gone. The signal simply dropped off the scopes, with no visual confirmation of its departure. Its disappearance coincided perfectly with the KJ-500's turn, reinforcing the belief that the two were intrinsically linked, part of a single coordinated operation. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Military analysts would later conclude that this was a textbook example of a planned disengagement. The mission had achieved its objectives. It had entered the ADIZ, tested response times, forced an intercept, collected electronic data on the F-16s and ground-based radars, evaluated pilot reactions to jamming and tactical feints, and then withdrawn. No weapons were fired, no sovereign airspace was violated, but the strategic impact was undeniable. By operating just below the threshold of open conflict, the Chinese crew had gathered priceless intelligence, while skillfully avoiding a diplomatic or military crisis. Inside the F-16s, the American pilots maintained their strict discipline to the very end. They held their escort formation, shadowing the KJ-500 as it flew eastward. Only after the Chinese aircraft had traveled more than 120 nautical miles from the Japanese coastline, well clear of the intercept zone, were they given clearance to break off and return to base. The American response, from the initial scramble to the final disengagement, was a masterclass in protocol and precision. There were no shortcuts, no unnecessary risks, and zero room for error. The most valuable asset gained from this encounter was not a tactical victory in the sky, but a wealth of data on the ground. Intelligence teams would now spend weeks, if not months, analyzing every radar sweep, every flicker of electronic interference, every subtle change in the KJ-500's flight path. In modern warfare, the real battles are often won not with missiles, but with information. Even a peaceful standoff can provide a decisive edge to the side that knows how to listen. The return of the F-16s to Misawa was smooth and professional. The roar of their engines faded, replaced by the quiet hum of cooling turbines on the tarmac. The pilots, still coursing with adrenaline, immediately met with intelligence officers for a full debriefing. These post-mission reviews are the critical link in the chain of readiness, the process by which raw, visceral experience is forged into future tactical doctrine. Every detail was dissected, the precise way the KJ-500 handled its rapid descent, the specific frequencies and strength of the jamming signals, the flight characteristics of the suspected drone. This data would be used to refine response plans, update threat libraries, and enhance coordination with their Japanese allies. It is a stark reminder that this entire tense engagement played out in the gray areas of international law. The KJ-500 never crossed the hard line into Japanese territory, yet it came close enough to challenge air defense protocols and stress test military reaction times. These are actions calculated to achieve strategic goals while maintaining plausible deniability. China knows exactly where the invisible lines are drawn, and it is becoming increasingly adept at walking right up to them. By the time the encounter was over, the message was clear. The Chinese aircraft had tested the limits, recorded the reactions, and withdrawn without direct consequence. But in doing so, it had also revealed its own tactics, its technological capabilities, and its operational patterns. This is the new battlefield, a silent, ceaseless contest of data, time, and precision. What appeared to be a harmless flyby was, in fact, a meticulously executed test. And the answers it provided are now locked away deep inside the RADAR logs and cockpit recordings of both nations. This is Goba. Subscribe for real-time battlefield updates and strategic insights.